I was inspired to make this video by a comment I received the other day that was asking a little bit about my process, which I've been asked before about, and I wanted to give everyone a little bit of insight into how I go about generating some of my AI imagery. And basically my response kind of led me to answer in a way that made me rethink exactly how I'm generating these images, or what I'm thinking about when I'm generating these images. And for me, in architecture, a lot of the time the forms are generated from the process of how they will be built. I was taught early on, actually in my graduate school, when I attended IAC, the Institute for Advanced Architecture in Catalonia in Spain, that it has a one-to-one relationship with the entire process, from ideation or conceptualization through construction. So for these purposes, I wanted to develop an image of a mud architecture or a rammed earth architecture. And I have the benefit of knowing that specifically in dall-e, there are not that many great references to either Adobe architecture, terracotta, mud, or rammed earth type architecture. And I guess a little bit of background in why I'm interested at all in that is just my curiosity in sort of sustainability and a non-toxic and earth-friendly approach to generating architecture, which in my older years here, I'm becoming more interested in, to find sort of a circular approach to generating architecture that can be easily demolished and rebuilt without creating a lot of damage to the earth. And so in this example, I am going to produce a mud architecture, and what I have in mind is sort of a spa-like environment, adding as much atmosphere as possible. Gives the image a lot of depth, and so I'm just going to start typing in some keywords here to generate my image that we can build upon. And I'll talk a little bit about the credits that I'm using here on dall-e in a moment, but I just want to get this started first. So we're going to type in mud architecture, and it typically has rounded corners, so I like to just define it with some geometric parameters, such as like curvilinear. So I'm going to say like a curvilinear mud architecture, or maybe architectural mud villa. And the reason I use villa is because it's a little more universal in terms of formulating an abode or a home or a house that has sort of native attributes to it, such as stone, grass, mud, more organic forms. But if you put in a term like modern, it's gonna make that villa maybe more European based, more modern European based. If you put in something like an Adobe villa, it's going to give you something much more, like I mentioned, organic or amorphic. So let's continue on here. A curvilinear architectural mud villa, and I know I'm going to want this kind of set in a prairie landscape, during sunrise. And I really like the kind of sunrise setting because it just gives a great atmospheric kind of colorization to the image typically. And we know that a lot of these images turn out dark, so I just like to call it like a bright sunrise And adding foggy is always a great thing. It's going to give you a little more depth, a little more kind of that mystic kind of quality to the image. So we're going to add that, a curvilinear architectural mud villa in a prairie landscape during a bright, foggy sunrise. So let's see, is there anything else we want to add to this just to kind of get started? Curvilinear. The more, kind of parameters or defining words you add, it can get more, no pun intended, like muddy in terms of the image production. It's going to get confused, so it's sometimes best to kind of start simple. But if there's anything else you want to add, like I do want to add some artificial lighting in here. Curvilinear architectural mud villa with artificial lighting. And that just means like the lights are probably going to be turned on within, or it might have some accent lighting. Artificial, you can even call it accent lighting in a prairie landscape during a bright, foggy sunrise. And I typically like to have some sort of water element, so prairie landscape with a pond. And we can see what that generates. Again, putting this in even a more descriptive locale, like if you had it in Australia versus if you had it in Japan, or you put it in somewhere in Greece, it's going to take those qualities of images that have that destination, that locality to it, and it's going to give the overall image that type of aesthetic. So right now, I mean, if I wanted this to have, a much more kind of earthy aesthetic, we've got the prairie, I might do like African, so that it actually has a lot of the like Adobe style architecture in it with some more organic shapes. So let's type a curvilinear architectural mud villa with artificial accent lighting in African prairie landscape with a pond during a bright, foggy sunrise. Let's just check this out and see what it produces. Okay, so right off the bat, pretty good results. It's pretty much in line with what I was envisioning. I might say that I would want to add a little bit of modernization into it, just so that it looks like it's kind of taking in some more modern day technology or construction kind of applications. And so I've already got some ideas that I'd want to roll with that. But like the image all the way over to the right here, it's got sort of like this castling effect on the top, which, could be cool if that's what you're going for. I'm not, so I'm not really interested to kind of continue that aesthetic. The lighting, you can see, that I specified the artificial accent lighting, so it's putting fixtures on the exterior, which is great, or like I mentioned, it's internally lit in some cases like that. This one is actually pretty interesting, this image here. It's got sort of this rolled barricade, and it is adjacent to the pond, and it looks like it's set in a prairie field. Definitely have some African vibes to it, just with the landscape and kind of the colorization, which is absolutely beautiful. I'm loving it. This one looks a little bit like it's out of the Flintstones, so again, it's not bad. I mean, it definitely has it's hitting all the targets that I prompted. So, but I'm liking this one the best, and so I can click variations on this. But, I guess, and you can also do the outpainting with it, which is great, but I'd want to kind of develop this a little further first. So, and just for you, those of you who aren't aware. I mean, you have on the side here in dall-e all of your previous prompts. They're saved on the side here now for you, so you can always recall or come back to them, reuse them, kind of generate off of them. So it's great that it kind of keeps all of your history there. Maybe I'll just, and I always like to copy and paste this just for kind of ease of working. And if you're like me, you'll press Control-C about 100 times to make sure that it's actually copied. But I am curious to see what kind of variations it would build off this, so let's give this a quick try. Okay, so this might happen to you, and it happens to me more often than I'd like, where the original is actually still my favorite over some of the variations that get generated. These aren't bad either, but I'm losing a bit of context here. It's kind of a little too hyper-focused on this geometry that it looked like it was trying to regenerate for me. It's keeping attributes of the internally lit with the accent lighting, which is great. But again, it's just a little too focused for my liking. But here it is introducing some interesting details that I like, again, in terms of construction and thinking about how this would actually be built. There's some hinting at lintel beams or sort of these protruding wooden elements over the door frame, and a little window cutout, which is really great. So, but I'm gonna go back to my original, and I'm gonna paste back in so we can continue on this road here with the curvilinear architectural mud villa with artificial lighting in an African prairie landscape with a pond during a bright foggy sunrise, and see how I would want to kind of modify this to see where it can go. I said I wanted to put some modernization into it, which I do. I like the arched opening, so I think I'm going to reinforce my prompt with that. So I'll just paste it back in here. A curvilinear architectural mud villa with arched openings, I'll say, and glass. So glass is going to be my kind of modernizing element here. That brings it into a kind of modernized architectural aesthetic, and let's say and arched openings and aluminum and glass windows, we'll say, and you can even put and modern aluminum and glass windows. And then here's something that I experiment with a lot, and I think there's probably a lot of good resources out there, whether or not to include commas between these elements. When you do add the commas, it severely changes how the prompt is absorbed into the system. It creates a clear line of definition between the ideas, and I don't like that because, especially for dall-e, it has trouble generating more artistic and kind of creative imagery like Midjourney does. So the more commas you add, especially in this program, it tends to generate very disparate elements in your image, meaning if I were to put a comma between this windows and then the artificial accent lighting, it may generate a whole separate kind of element in this image. Like an artificial accent light in Africa, in an African prairie, it might just put a standalone light fixture in a prairie, like next to my architecture here. But I'm trying to get it to be integrated, so I'm just going to remove all of that, and I want it to be kind of as fluid as possible. And then using the ands and the widths is kind of your best signifier to like start a new idea while making it fluid. So let's try this. A curvilinear architectural mud villa with arched openings and modern aluminum and glass windows with artificial lighting. See, now it might put the artificial lighting associated with the glass windows, but we're just going to give that a try first here. In an African prairie landscape with a pond during a bright. Okay, I like that. Let's just kind of see, because we're trying to build on what we're doing here. So let's see how this takes this. Okay, so we are definitely getting a more modern, sort of futuristic aesthetic here, which I do like, but it's looking a little too futuristic, and it's losing a bit of that handcrafted quality for me, although I do like some of the geometry that's sort of growing out of this one here. You see some repetition, definitely getting the arches and the artificial illumination, accent lighting with a pond and the prairie style and the kind of African landscape setting. So this image isn't too far off from what I was envisioning, although seeing this now, I would like to add a little more vegetation and maybe some more life to the image. So I'm going to go back and start editing this. Let's see what we can add here. Well, I just want to look at this image again here too. So this looks not like mud. This looks like a concrete formation, but the geometry is nice, and it's taking on the arched geometries and the storefront system with the aluminum and glass that I input. And I do actually like sort of the mossy landscape in the foreground here, and the setting is very nice. So, sometimes you can be inspired by the images that you see to kind of continue generating along that path. Like this looks like more of a savannah landscape, than a prairie, which I like, and I think I'm going to kind of continue on that path. Okay, so let's change African savannah, an African savannah landscape with a pond during a bright, foggy sunrise, which is good. I'm liking that. I wanted to add also curvilinear architectural mud villa, mud terracotta villa with arched openings and modern. Okay, so I wanted to get some more landscape in here, so I'm going to do in an African savanna landscape with native trees and a pond during a bright, foggy sunrise. So I'm curious to take this modern word out so that it doesn't give it any futuristic vibes, and I put back in mud terracotta villa. I wanted to add maybe some more organic or natural elements into the architecture. So curvilinear architectural mud terracotta villa with arched openings. I don't know, let's say like wooden arched openings and aluminum and glass windows. Let's just give it a go, see how it generates. Okay, so definitely went a little too far with some of these elements. Now it's looking a little too cartoony for my preference, a little too awkward in terms of it took it upon itself to kind of give it a modern effect, even though we took out the modern defining word. This image I do like a lot. It's got the big arched opening. It looks like it's framed in wood or some other element, which is giving it a defined line there. which is giving me some other ideas about adding some more detail to the architecture. I like this road that it's generating and having some kind of tire marks leading up to it. But I think it did take the savannah prompt well. Interestingly enough, it kind of put back in this rolled element in the foreground here, which I'm starting to wonder if I should prompt it more significantly to include as kind of like some geometric landscaping to kind of show some architectural implementation on the landscape adjacent to the architecture. So let's go back here and let's kind of get more specific. So with a wooden arched, I don't know, say like wooden framed arched openings, and I wanted to give some element of like form work while this mud architecture is being formulated. I know with rammed earth, they use forms, and that's how you get those beautiful striations in terms of the different colors of mud or adobe or mixed compounds being added and compressed in all these layers. So I want to have that effect on the architecture. So I'm going to try and add something to that effect here, a Curvilinear. And I also want to just throw in organic somewhere here to promote maybe just some more organic type of features. So I'm going to say an organic Curvilinear architectural mud terracotta villa with wooden framed arched openings and aluminum and glass windows. I think I want to take the aluminum out and just kind of see what it does with and glass windows with artificial accent lighting in African savannah with native trees and a pond during a bright, foggy sunrise. Okay, so I wanted to do some form work here. So an organic curvilinear architectural mud terracotta. I'm just going to put it in form work, striations. That's kind of an odd one, and this is getting pretty long, so I typically don't like it to be kind of any longer than the prompt box is. It's kind of a silly method for gauging how long it should be. Typically, I think people say like no more than 30 words or something. It looks like we're kind of approaching that. An organic curvilinear architectural mud with form work, striations. With form work striations and wooden framed arched openings and glass windows with, okay, let's just give it a go. Okay, so I sort of purposely took it here to make a point that adding too much or making the prompt, get a little too overachieving is going to give you, looser results in terms of, what your focus should have been. I am sort of liking this colonnade that's appearing here, so typically I may have kind of continued on that and sort of worked on the repetition kind of quality of that to continue in architecture. But I got this notification that I've got 10 credits left, and so I wanted to quickly kind of touch on that. If you go up to the tab here and you select the credits and learn more about the credits, it's going to kind of explain that once you are signed up, it's telling you get 50 free credits during your first month, which I've obviously blown past. And then 15 free credits will replenish every month after that on the same day of the month. For example, if you signed up on August 3rd, your free credits will refill on September 3rd, etc., etc. I wanted to create this video to kind of show what you can do with your 15 free credits also. So I'm gonna kind of go back to my image where I was at. And we were on this series, but I did kind of like this image, and so I was curious to see what could happen if I expanded upon this image. And again, if you always have the ability to share and publish these images, which I'm just going to show how it kind of shows if you created a link to publicly share it. It then gives you your prompt back if you needed to reuse it for anything. I think it's also available in other spots on the website, but this is a nice way to just kind of capture it. And if you were going to share the image, which a lot of people are doing, the AI community, with the prompt, this kind of presents it in a nice way. You can screen grab it and share it. But anyway, I wanted to grab the prompt here and come back to our image and try and do some editing on this. So I'm in the edit mode now, and I want to outpaint it. Sorry, I don't want to edit it. I want to outpaint it. So I'm going to download the image. I'm going to go back to my dall-e, and I'm going to ask to try the outpainting tool here up in the right hand corner. Pull down, try outpainting, open editor, and it allows you to input your image. So you can start by uploading an image, which we're going to go to our downloads, find our image that we downloaded, and now we have it here. And again, I have my prompt here that I can kind of pick and choose some of these words to develop on the image. If you want to keep in theme with it, which I do here. Okay, so I've got my image. I said, okay, add generation frame. Okay, so here I'm selecting like where I want to build upon this from, and the more you overlap it, the more hints it kind of takes from that original image. So I'm going to use my eraser, and I actually don't want this in the image because I think it's taking too much of the foreground there, and I don't want the image to really be about that. I want it to start taking more clues of the landscape that's around it. So if I do that and I plug back in my original prompt here, or the prompt that generated this image, I'm going to kind of pare this down a little bit to make it a little more streamlined and focused. I want to get rid of like the wooden arched openings and the aluminum and glass villa, and that's much better. Curvilinear architectural mud villa. And I do want like a villa to kind of appear next to it. So in this first one, I am going to keep that architectural mud terracotta villa in with the artificial lighting and the landscaping and et cetera, et cetera. I may take out like this pond. And if you reinforce the bright, foggy sunrise, it shouldn't really make a difference. It's going to kind of pick up on the clue that you have there, but I don't have much in this image, so I'm going to keep that prompt in. Trees, just during a bright, foggy sunrise, and let's see what it creates here. And yes, I am liking this first image off the bat. It's giving me the artificial accent lighting, which is very nice. It's picking up on the mud with the kind of organic form. That's great. Here we go, another great addition. Building upon the villa that we had there, taking clues from it and creating another one in sort of a different form, which is nice. This one sort of rounding out the image nicely, a tree uplighting, I don't mind that either. And then this one, which I would have said is really nice because I like this sort of mysterious architecture happening in the background, although it's sort of butchered my sky here, so I'm not going to use that one. This one's pretty intriguing. Again, I'm going to flip through these like one more time, and then I don't know, I think this tree actually is like rounding off the image very nicely, and then I'll have to try and find something to put in the foreground here in another image. But let's accept this one just for kind of the purposes of moving forward here. And it's a good idea to kind of just continually check your credits, make sure where you're at on the generation here. And we're going to go ahead and move our plane. I erased that portion of the image that was at the bottom there because I didn't like that large rolling form, but now I'm left with kind of a missing chunk at the bottom there. It's going to make it a bit awkward to continue developing the image in the foreground. I'd rather kind of continue going out and upward, but let's see what happens. I'm going to move it all the way over just so it kind of captures all the part that I erased, and I want to put in something. Actually, I might want to put in like some rocks or something in the foreground. Curvilinear, architectural mod, terracotta villa. I'm just going to take this all out and just put boulders. And prairie landscaping. Say native prairie landscaping. Yeah, I don't know. This should be simple enough. Let's see what it comes up with. So some pretty poor results on this one. I've actually got, you'll see from time to time some watermarks kind of populate in your image, which is really ridiculous, but it happens. Bad kind of compromise on the geometry of the image here. This one, I don't know what that is. It's a tiny little like Coke can or something. And this one is the most decent. I should have erased a little bit more of the image, but I really liked kind of the roadway, so I didn't want it to manipulate too much of that. So what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of continue. I'm going to accept these rocks here and pan this over. Again, I want to go back to the architectural prompt that I had at the beginning, because I want to try and get another architectural villa off to the right hand side here that mimics this one, and then we can kind of round out the image with a little more sky. So I'm going to go back to this, copy paste, and I think I can just leave that all in, and I will. I'm going to see what comes up here. Okay, so I'm not really getting the images I thought I'd be getting. The architecture is a little off base, and I realize it's because I didn't have any overlap from the architecture I wanted it to draw from, which is like our main architectural mud villa over here. So it's just producing, kind of random results. This one was sort of closer, but it's really out of kind of character adjacent to our existing image here. So I did actually like this element here, which is sort of a landscape wall, window, frame overlooking the pond area. So I'm going to roll with this and fix this sky here. So we're going to accept that, take this and zoom out here and overlap it again, and just put the bright foggy sunrise in here and see what it can generate. I'm also trying to get an image that's sort of a 9:16, so I guess it wouldn't hurt to just put it a little higher. Okay, this is much better already. You might want to avoid images where you see things kind of cropping in from the edge, like this tree here. I don't want to have to like add a tree in the foreground to compensate for that. So an image like this looks gorgeous, but again, it's got some like tree element that I know is going to sort of ruin the rest of my image. And that's a nice little touch. It's got sort of a sun flare hexagon, but a little too much for my needs. So I'm going to accept this first one, and we're going to march along here. I wanted to mention too that you have to remember before you move the box, or after you move the box, if you've edited your prompt and then touch and move the box again, it will revert your edit to the prompt. So just make sure to double check the prompt before you click generate every time after you move the box. So here I've got I'm overlapping enough of the image that hopefully I can just leave bright foggy sunrise, and I don't want it to add another sun, so I'm just going to say sky, bright sunrise sky, or sunrise colorful sunrise sky with clouds. I don't know, and let's see what it comes up with. This was like a close call here. I don't know why I thought I wanted some cartoonish looking clouds. Definitely don't. Again, with the tree, which isn't bad, I can kind of play off of this tree in the next one and sort of round out the image. Maybe I will do that actually. Not sure why this is in here, and the last option is probably what I was looking for, which is just the emptiness. But looking at this again, I think I will play off of this tree that I generated and just move it over here and say native savannah tree. And just hope that it picks up on enough of the context that it just keeps it and finishes up my image there. So let's check it out. So this is probably a good learning lesson for myself and everyone watching. The difference that it makes to erase part of the image that you're overlapping versus just keeping it in. So look at these ridiculous results. Native savannah tree is what I prompted, and it's giving me like two which look very similar, which I don't like. A very literal like educational overlay of what a savannah tree might look like, and then a third result which just looks butchered and a little ridiculous. So what I'm going to do is cancel that and erase just part of the image here leading up to part of the image there, and run this again. And I'm just going to say savannah tree, maybe canopy. I don't know if that's going to hurt it or not. And let's give that a go. Okay, so that sort of did the trick. It's not exactly what I was looking for, and I can run a few, or no, I can't. I'm all out of my credits now. So I guess we're just going to have to settle on where we're at with this. But, it gave me the canopy, and this one's not bad. This one, it's got a little bit of like actual sun lighting there, which I like. It looks like it's picking up on the sunrise that's peeking over the mountains over there. And if you don't look too close at these images, it usually ends up being okay enough, and you can always take this into Photoshop and kind of hit the underside of that with a highlight. I might do that afterwards, but I don't really like these other images. They don't really lend to the composition that well. So I don't mind this one, but the gap there is sort of bothering me. So I think I like this one the best. It's got a bit of interest, and it's playing off of the geometry of this tree, just sort of at a larger scale. So we're going to accept this one, and this is going to be our image, and I don't mind it. I'm kind of taking some steps here to make this video educational, but at the same time, provide some level of insight into my process about how I generate these images, or at least how I would like to continue generating these images moving forward. If you follow me on LinkedIn, or if you've seen some of the other content on this channel, you may know that my background is in curvilinear architecture and geometry, using formwork, framework to create unique geometries that are precise. But I am getting more interested in organic architectures that can be produced using 3D printing or formwork with Adobe, mud, terracotta, other organic mixtures, cob and hay being used as sort of the binding element in some of these mixtures. So I'm starting to explore more architectures that have a good balance between modern or even a futuristic lean with very ancient, maybe building techniques that are making a comeback because they have sort of, they do have good qualities in terms of sustainability and earth friendliness. But I think there's a lot of benefits to them as well in terms of our health, our mental health, and these things need to really find their way into the architectural profession. We need to make a way that they can become normalized and people can feel comfortable, being in a home with mud walls. But I got a lot of funny comments about some of the organic images I was producing early on with Midjourney. Some comments were like, drywallers are going to hate this guy. No one can drywall arches like that for an economical price. And that's true. I mean, I think if anyone, has tried to do curved architecture, they've probably run into the issue of finding contractors, good builders that understand how to do curved geometry. So we're starting to lean on technologies that can do some of that for us to replace the lost art of building curved organic geometries that was simpler to produce with something like a mud or Adobe hut where you literally built it with your hands and some formwork, and it was okay if the geometry wasn't perfect. But the expectations of everyone nowadays is that the geometry needs to be perfect. My walls need to be clean. It needs to look Instagram worthy. And so if we're producing something that's below that quality level, it's going to resemble something of a third world country. Well, I would argue that the future needs to resemble that, so that, for many reasons, one being it can and should be more economical, especially if we have technology assisting us build these geometries. Number two, it's okay to see deviations and, some character in the architectures that we build. I don't think we need to have these Lego box architectures. We have had that, and we do have that with a lot of elements like metal panels and these kind of prefabricated architectural components to make our buildings look and seem like building kits, like Lego kits. And I don't think it's a good thing. I don't think, we don't originate from that type of mechanized or robotized aesthetic. We originate from images like this, that they're organic, they're typically near a water source. They were, generated from the earth, from the mud that is around us. Again, there's a lot of building techniques that we've lost in terms of cooling and heating a home, orientation of a home based on the sun path or the winds, or if you're building adjacent to a mountain range, how the winds and weather patterns may affect that. And we don't use a lot of those things in our architectural concepts anymore because we're either typically building a residential home that's on a suburban block that has to face a certain way because that's where the lot is, or there's a commercial development that needs to maximize the square footage in terms of leasable real estate for tenants so that the developer can make their money back. And these are the driving forces now of architecture, not these sort of native approaches that keep and kept us in tune with and in touch with the earth. And if you're still listening to this, I guess I'm going to make this an episode to introduce the conversion of this channel into what I'm calling architecture for thought, which is going to promote a new way to look at architecture. It's going to explore how technology can influence architecture to move back towards a in-tune aesthetic and mode of operation with the earth. And I think that's the possible future that I want to promote and that we should be living in, just based on what we're seeing in the world with people's health, with the cost of manufactured elements. This channel will focus on creating architecture that can be beautiful, that can be healthy, that can be available to all, because we are building with the elements of the earth and we are using technologies that are affordable now and understood by many in prior generations and generations to come. So thanks for sticking with me, and I appreciate your interest in this channel, in my architectural concepts, and hopefully you will enjoy the content that is to come. Thanks a lot.